From the Tower District in Fresno, California, you're listening to the Wake, Bake, Caffeinate podcast with your host, Eve Ryland. Now here's the badass activist herself, Eve Ryland.
Welcome to Wake, Bake, Caffeinate podcast, episode 4. This is Eve, and this week's Deconstruction of Autism Speaks focuses back on the Town and Country article that ran in August of 2006. That article very clearly outlined the original players of the autism cabal that began in 2003. That cabal's network has now since expanded over all these years to become what is now known as the Autism Speaks Influence Network. Now you can find that network list I have created over on internationalbadassactivist.org, and it's linked right off the home page. That list is not complete, but there is already a lot there, and I will be adding more to it very soon. Now, in this episode, I'll be sharing a third segment of that Town and Country article titled Autism's Angels. I'll share that portion, and then I will share a summary of my autistic perspective and the breakdown of what I read, and to see if you could see what I see. So this part of that article includes Autism Speaks right off the top, Cure Autism Now, NYCA, The Rights, The Slatkins, and author Karen Sif Excorn, and more. A lot about applied behavioral analysis in ABA, and it will also illustrate the lobbying by Autism Speaks and their network groups and buddies to get legislation passed that would make Medicaid and other insurances or health insurances cover autism therapy and ABA. So what's astounding to me is while they were speaking about ABA and talking about it with parents and media, what they said is ABA didn't work for them or for their child or grandchild, right? The Wright stated it didn't work for their grandson. Suzanne Wright said that was because they were about 7 months too late. So I guess they missed the window of opportunity for ABA to work with their grandson. So the push for earlier diagnosis, earlier intervention, the better, was really being shown here. And of course, that intervention and that hope that they were giving parents was ABA. The author, Karen Sif Excorn, made a statement in this article that ABA was only successful with 5 to 10% of autistics. I'm going to say that again. They made the statement that ABA was only successful with 5 to 10% of autistics. That gives ABA a 90 to 95% failure rate. They promoted ABA by its failure rate with the idea that early intervention would change that rate and more autistics would be recovered because of early intervention, the earlier the better, the more likely they could be recovered and then mainstreamed by elementary school, and thus lessening the burden that they would have otherwise if they weren't recovered. ABA would keep autistics from breaking up their parents' marriages and bankrupting the world. If they could just get infants diagnosed early enough and start ABA even as early as 6 months, that success rate would become astronomical, right? It would no longer be a failure rate. There would be a success rate outside of 5 or 10%, okay? But How do we know that? How do we know that's going to happen? I don't know, but I guess these parents and grandparents wanted it to be so. So I guess like the autism epidemic, they said so, so therefore it is. Right now, even today, the highest success rate for ABA in a study is 50%. 50%. And that study has never been replicated, ever. They've never been able to repeat that. So even the U.S. Department of Defense has submitted reports twice now saying ABA doesn't work. They had the same conclusion. It doesn't work. So we've got this fix for the failure of ABA for being early intervention. Earlier the better, but it doesn't work, right? So what they tell parents is the fix for ABA is earlier ABA, intervention at younger ages. The earlier the better. So that's the solution, because ABA didn't work for those children. You get ABA on toddlers and infants, and then it's definitely going to work. So that's the answer to that. But that really does just sound a lot to me like the drug industry telling doctors that their opioid product wasn't addictive, and when patients came to them having issues, to just prescribe more, and that would take care of it all. Well, we know where we're at with that, don't we? In 2020, the autism treatment market was valued at $2 billion. It was forecasted to be at $2.45 billion by 2025. The report states that autism treatment programs generated $1.4 billion a year, and the medications market is worth $627 million a year. All right. So what happened between August 2006, when the ABA industry didn't exist, not like this, and now? Well, that was the Combating Autism Act plus state-by-state legislation, lobbied by Autism Speaks and their cohorts to get this autism therapy covered by health insurance and Medicaid. Autism Speaks and pals lobbied for it. They were telling the world they were going to take the financial burden off of parents' backs by getting these insurances to help pay for this expensive autism therapy. That was their only hope for their autistic child, ABA. So these organizations and parents justified the steep upfront cost as less than the overall burden of an unrecovered autistic over their lifetime. With the autism epidemic and autistics aging into adulthood, where they would break the bank. They would bankrupt the world if something wasn't done. So right now, in this narrative, they were already breaking up their parents' marriages and families. Well, we couldn't just let autistics take out the world too, right? Okay, so, and unlike in 2006, today legislation is in place in all 50 states to cover this autism therapy. Insurance coverage for autistic kids is now at 64%. The top 9 for-profit chains are estimated to have posted revenue of $547 million in 2019. The report also lists Autism Speaks as one of the main players in this autism therapy market. And last but not least, I'm going to share with you Autism Speaks announced their launch of the Autism Cares Network earlier this year. They're touting it as a 20-site learning health network. Now, there'll be more about that coming up, but just to briefly remind you, the Autism Care Network is the latest in reiteration of the Autism Treatment Network, ATN. ATN was a Cure Autism Now project that merged with Autism Speaks in 2007.